My name is Emma. My major is psychology with a concentration in social science.
My name is Bryan, and I'm a banking and finance major.
My name is Fouad Abou-Rizk, and my major is electronic media broadcasting with a focus in production. The major normally leads people into careers in the TV and radio industries.
My name is Chance Watson, and I'm majoring in business management.
We will be talking about the theme of audience engagement within our fields and in a popular podcast called Serial. The podcast investigates a murder case from 1999 that has lots of contradictory evidence.
Sarah engages the audience by simply asking the listeners questions, not in a way that is information-seeking, but as to encourage the listener to reflect on what has happened in the current and previous episodes. In episode 1, when Sarah shares her conversation with Adnan discussing his innocence, she later says, "He's adamant about this, you can hear it, right?" Here she polls the listener's opinion on whether or not Adnan is innocent. This hugely plays on the pathos Sarah creates throughout the entire season. Sarah ends episode 1 with a question as well. She says, "And if I can help getting to the bottom of this, shouldn't I try?" Again, this pulls on the listener's pathos and emotional connection they have to the story. By leaving the audience with the obvious leading question, it also helps the audience want to continue with the next episode.
In the podcast, the narrator Sarah Koenig describes her process of investigating the case. In the beginning of episode 3, she talks about how she attempted to interview the detectives who worked on this case, but they turned her down. Throughout the podcast, she engages the audience by letting the listener in on how she investigated the case, who she interviewed, and how the interviews went.
From the detectives' audio recordings such as Mr. S's interview and the cell phone logs, Sarah portrays credibility to engage the audience to the murder case in Serial. Sarah connects to the audience through her ethos. The narrator portrays a great amount of credibility that allows the audience to be engaged to the case through trusting her thorough investigation of it. One of Sarah's main sources of credibility is through her use of original audio recordings from police interrogations and her own interviews. Sarah's most influential and credited aspects are the actual police reports. While investigating the murder case, Sarah refers to the police reports to propose the question as to whether Adnan is guilty or innocent.
Colloquial language allows the general audience of Serial to have an equal opportunity to understand what is going on. More importantly, when speaking in a non-professional way, Sarah presents herself more as a friend than a narrator. She openly says that is a fuck-up in regard to a situation gone wrong. She also describes the interaction as so high school. Listening to Sarah makes Serial seem more casual and thus appealing to a general audience.
The way Serial connects with an audience is also heavily based on the effective use of pathos. This is the emotional connection with an audience. She makes everything about the investigation personal. She is not a detective herself, she is like you or me. The way she uses her words and her tone, you can tell she is passionate about this case. With that passion, she reaches out to her audience and grabs their undivided attention. Sarah, in episode 2 of Serial, reads off Haymon Lee's diary, the murder victim. As she reads the diary, a very mysterious tune rises up, and Sarah's voice captures every level of emotion the diary has to offer.
I want to give you some info about how audience engagement fits into my discipline. I read a text which had the purpose of educating people about how television programs can successfully engage their audiences. The ethos of the writers come from their doctorate degrees and jobs as university professors within the field of communications. It's important that they have this credibility in order for the content of the article to be believed and trusted. According to this source, it is ideal that a program's viewer wants to connect with the program, fellow viewers, and the actors and actresses who star in the show. It discusses how an involved viewer of a successful TV show wants to talk about the show with their peers and engage with the show and its actors on social media. The intended audience for this text would most likely be individuals who work within the TV industries and have influence in its programs. I believe that the text can give these people insight in how to improve their television shows to get more audience engagement.
The article I read was about social psychology through conversation analysis in neighbor disputes. The author analyzed transcripts of recorded conversations between two people, usually an operator and a client. What's important is how the author includes these transcripts as evidence. Conversation analysts use a specific system when writing down what is said in a conversation, which stresses how words are said. In order to dictate this, words are written phonetically and symbols are used to show where emphasis is placed. The author includes the academically correct transcripts in her article along with her own analysis of the interactions. This is engaging to an educated audience because they are able to read and interpret the original transcript independent of the author's analysis. These transcripts have value, which of course is dependent upon the level of education the reader has. The more information the reader knows about the subject, the more the reader can understand and engage with the text. As in any scholarly article, the language changes from colloquial to an academic style. The author of my article employs this maximally. Her analyses of the given transcripts are highly educated and would not mean much to someone without a background in conversation and analysis. This benefits the author a few different ways. Using big words adds to her ethos. A reader recognizes that this author knows what she's talking about because she can be specific and use technical terms. The audience is more likely to trust a credible source and want to gain knowledge from their findings. By including these seemingly complicated sentences, the author is engaging the readers. Because this article is directed towards an audience that is familiar with conversation analysis, a reader is going to gain more information from a technical sentence than one that is reduced to terms that a general audience can understand. Interestingly, the author of this article also has a TED Talk on a very similar topic. For contrast, I watched the TED Talk and noticed how different her language choice was. I'm not exactly trained in conversation analysis, so I understood more of the material from the TED Talk, but to someone who is trained, the article would have proved more informational than the TED Talk.
One of the main categories to focus on when it comes to audience engagement is relationships. An audience becomes more engaged when there is a relationship with the author because the interest is at a peak. In order to develop a relationship, there must be trust between the author and the intended audience. Trust is a necessary aspect in a successful business. A manager must have trust from his or her workers so they will listen to their ideas and commands. Trust is something that has begun to fall off the circuit with business. Writers from the Academy of Management Journal quote, "The 2014 Edelman Trust Barometer, a 27-country survey with more than 33,000 respondents, finds that overall trust declined across countries and sectors, with CEOs ranking second lowest at 43% and government officials the lowest at 36% as credible spokesmen." The author in this text appeals to the audience through ethos, the rhetorical appeal of credibility. Ethos is another way of gaining trust from the audience. The authors give us the research statistics to engage the reader with credibility and facts. Being honest and giving cold hard facts helps to gain trust from an individual. Business leaders benefit from gaining trust in an organization, whether it be from more products sold because of higher consumer value or seeing their employees working hard.
In the business world, one of the most effective ways to be successful is to exercise your audience engagement tools. Logos, an appeal to logic, is one of the most effective ways to do this in business. I read an article on how audience engagement affects product placement in business. The article reaches out to those who are looking to extend their business and effectively sell their products. Clients look for logic first. Once having understood the logic of said business, you then must have a more personal connection with the client. Just having an appeal for logic will not get you very far. You need something to tie it all together, a little charm. By doing this, you can connect personally with your clients. Another important aspect to think about in business is credibility, your ethos. A client will not be your client if he does not trust you as a credible source. Having a degree in business from a prominent school can give you the credibility you need to get a jump start in the world of business. The more credible businessmen usually get the better jobs, more money, and realistically more power. Without this credibility, you end up working for a terrible company with no respect. This isn't always the case, but in most situations, it does tend to end this way. The big law firms pick up all the top students from the top schools. If you are not in that boat, you are out of luck. Credibility is a large portion of business, arguably the most important.
In any field, it is important to engage your audience and consumers in order to be successful. Understanding who your audience is, knowing their demographics and preferences will allow you to have greater rhetorical success in your field. Our desire is that through our presentation, you have an exceptional perception of audience engagement and its variation from general to specific audiences.